I'd like to give a warm welcome to Senator the Honourable Don Farrell, Minister for Trade and Tourism. Hello, Minister.
Hello, Chair.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And George Mina, Deputy Secretary of the Trade and Investment Group in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Mr. Mina.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good to see you as well.
Good to see you.
It's my favourite part of the day, but don't tell the others that. Now, do either of you gentlemen have an opening statement that you'd like to make tonight?
Thank you, Chair. I don't, but I understand Mr. Mina does.
Excellent. Deputy Secretary, you have the call.
Chair.
The floor's yours.
Chair, at a challenging time for the global trading landscape, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is focused on positioning Australia as strongly as possible on its trade and economic interests. This means maintaining strong partnerships, strong influence and networks, including through activist trade diplomacy, and strong resilience at home in our economy and institutions. These are the assets that Australia has brought to bear in engaging closely with the new US administration. We've put forward at the highest levels Australia's significant contribution to US prosperity and the mutual benefit of our deep and long-standing economic partnership. Our patient and steadfast diplomacy has allowed us to work cooperatively with China to wind back around $20 billion worth of trade impediments on Australian exports. Australia's live rock lobster trade to China restarted in December 2024, and that followed the removal of Chinese impediments on Australian wine, red meat, barley, oat and hay, cotton, timber, coal and copper ores and concentrates. We're working closely with business and the community at large to diversify Australia's trading markets, while our industries diversify the products and services they offer the world. We finalised a deal with the United Arab Emirates in November 2024, expected to increase Australian exports by around $700 million a year to our largest trade and investment partner in the Middle East and a key security partner. And as you know, this agreement followed a completed deal with the United Kingdom, which entered into force in May 2023 and secures duty-free access to the UK for 99% of Australian products. We've upgraded the free trade agreement between Australia, New Zealand and ASEAN. This upgrade, which Australia ratified on 20 February this year, will further reduce barriers for Australian trade. We've strengthened the economic partnerships and links of our own region through our Southeast Asia economic strategy. As part of that strategy, we're reviewing our network of trade agreements in the region to identify opportunities to upgrade and ensure that they keep expanding business opportunities. Chair, Australia has benefited greatly from rules-based trade. We're leading work in the WTO to drive reform to that institution because we know that it urgently needs to respond to the concerns of its members if it's to remain relevant. We're also driving new rules to meet the needs of a new economic era, including to deliver new global rules on digital trade. We've opened up consultation on trade policy through a variety of new mechanisms, such as the Trade 2040 Task Force, which brings a range of business, union and civil society representatives into policy-making efforts to chart a course for Australia's trading future. We're advancing First Nations trade and investment for Australia, bringing together First Nations business leaders, industry groups and experts in international trade for the first time earlier this month. And we played a lead role in finalising a landmark global treaty that protects First Nations intellectual property in May last year, a historic practical step that helps First Nations businesses and exporters share in the economic benefits of trade. Australia's activism in trade diplomacy shapes a safer world for our economy, creating jobs, delivering better outcomes for our consumers and boosting national prosperity. Chair, embracing global trade and investment has always been at the heart of Australia's security and prosperity. Trade supports 31% of Australia's economic output and 3 million Australian jobs. There's no doubt we're living through a challenging time for our trading interests. And as the Prime Minister says, Australia is a trading nation. And in navigating this challenging time, we need a pragmatic blend of dealing with the world as it is and hewing towards our bearings, our commitment to openness and rules in global trade to the greatest extent possible. We'll continue to use all of our assets, including our strong partnerships around the world and our first-class trade policy expertise in the department, to continue our activism in favour of Australian interests. Thank you, Chair. We look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mr. Mina. Now, are you happy to table that for us so we can have that statement, the opening statement circulated to senators? Yeah, sure. Sure, someone from the Secretariat will assist by collecting that for us. Thank you, Georgia. Now, Senator Cadell, you have the call, my friend.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Mina, we might start with one of the earliest things you said there. We're talking about challenging times in trade. You spoke about the US specifically. Your phrase, I think, in that, if I'm not paraphrasing, was we've put forward at the highest levels our interaction with the United States. Has the highest levels, has the Prime Minister had any discussions regarding trade with the US?
Well, I think, Senator, thank you for the question. It will be evident to all who were watching the media on the 11th of February after the Prime Minister's discussions with the President that there were such discussions as part of the Prime Minister's phone call with the President.
On that first phone call on the congratulatory, okay.
Well, yes, I'm not sure if it was the first, but it was that phone call after inauguration, exactly.
Has anyone from your department been briefed or met with the US government since the inauguration in January?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Has
please?
anyone from your department been briefed or met with the US government since the inauguration?
Indeed, Senator, the Australian Embassy is working very actively, led very ably by Ambassador Rudd, with an extraordinary level of activism and engagement with the new US administration.
Can I get a list of who has met from your department and when?
Certainly, Senator. This was traversed earlier in the day,
yep.
And we have undertaken to get some material to you. Of course, this was complemented, this activism at the Washington end, by some very significant political level engagement, as we also traversed earlier today. The Prime Minister's phone call, the Deputy Prime Minister's visit, the Foreign Minister's engagement at the inauguration, and of course the Treasurer's visit in the last couple of days.
All those names you meant, I think the Foreign Minister also went to the inauguration. Did the Ambassador go to the inauguration, Minister?
So, Senator Peter Savchuk, First Assistant Secretary, Geostrategy and Partnerships Division. As Mr Mina mentioned, there have been a lot of high-level contacts, including the Prime Minister's call on the 11th of February that followed up his initial congratulatory call to President Trump when he won the election. They covered a raft of issues, including issues in relation to our value as an economic partner to the United States. We had the Foreign Minister went to Washington for the inauguration. That was quite unusual because foreign dignitaries tend not to be invited. So as the first time an Australian Foreign Minister attended the inauguration, she had the opportunity to meet with Secretary of State Rubio and with National Security Advisor Waltz, where she articulated the value of our alliance, but also our economic partnerships in terms familiar to you. And as Mr Mina mentioned, as reported in terms of the Prime Minister's phone call with President Trump. And we've had the Deputy Prime Minister meet with his counterpart. In fact, that was the first time that Secretary of Defence Hegseth met with a foreign counterpart. That was with our Deputy Prime Minister. And we had the Treasurer, obviously, in Washington this week for the Super Summit that the Embassy hosted, where we had very high-level attendance. I think it's a tribute to our Ambassador in Washington and the team that he leads, the networks that they're able to galvanise in order to get these ministerial-level contacts, which are really quite, puts us very much at the fore as a close ally with good access in the US system. And he does that by the leverage he has in those networks across Congress, in the White House, in the Pentagon, governors at the state level. And that's all come to bear in very evident ways. It's very hard to enumerate all the contacts that our embassy has had across that network, but I suppose the outcome of those contacts is very clear from the high level of ministerial engagement we've had to date.
Well, we don't know the outcome yet. The intent of those contacts would be fair, would you say?
That's an ongoing body of work, of course, as our Minister mentioned earlier today, the Foreign Minister.
Going back to the inauguration, you mentioned the Foreign Minister. My question to the Minister was, did the Ambassador go to that as well, or did the Foreign Minister take his seat? Or
Look, I understand, but that both of them attended the inauguration, but I'll get that checked and come back to you.
Okay.
Senator, I can add, so for the inauguration, it was the foreign minister that attended the actual inauguration ceremony. The ambassador did not. Typically, ambassadors do represent foreign governments at inauguration ceremonies, but the foreign minister was there as invitee.
We had one seat and we grabbed, yeah, understood. Has the department prepared any meeting briefs for Ambassador Rudd or representatives for meetings on trade details since November 24?
Well, Senator, as is often the case, we provide supporting materials to all of our senior ambassadorial representatives. So yes, we have been providing material.
Not material meeting for specific meeting briefs for specific meetings? Have they been occurring?
Well, typically, Senator, meeting briefs for an ambassador would be fashioned, shaped and adjusted on for the circumstances by the relevant embassy concerned. It's not typically the case that Canberra will be shaping those briefs in sort of great detail here. What we do provide, and what we provide on a regular basis, is supporting analysis, arguments, material that goes to our ambassadors for use in their advocacy.
I know your use of language is not typical that Australia would be involved in preparation of this. Has it happened in this occurred? Has Australia...
Well, Australia would certainly be involved, Senator.
No, you said the Australian offices.
Canberra, Canberra end of our operation might not finalise a brief, but look, it depends on the circumstances. All sorts of circumstances involved, and different products are produced for different occasions.
So was there any specific analysis or advice prepared for specific meetings that can be tabled?
We would not be putting our advice, tabling our advice.
Okay. Has the ambassador been refused any meetings with any officials within the American government?
Senator, we would need to take that on notice.
Ambassador Rudd's not the sort of guy who would take no for an answer, Senator Cadell.
Well, he took yes for an answer when he was told to take down tweets and social media then, I noticed that. But it's... is the department doing work on the impact of the first round of trade, steel and aluminium, and the impact on Australia?
Senator, as a general proposition, the department is working on economic analysis, on the potential impact of tariffs, and we're doing that in conjunction with the Australian Treasury, which takes the lead on modelling matters.
So Treasury's taking the economic modelling lead?
On questions to do with economic modelling, macroeconomic modelling, yes, Treasury does take the lead. We have a capability inside our department, and we have our Chief Economist, Mr Woods, with us. But that capability is not as extensive as that of the Australian Treasury.
Mr Woods, has the department formed an opinion and supplied to government the estimates of the impact of on the Australian economy of the first round of tariffs?
So Dave Woods, Chief Economist from Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Senator, to pick up from the point that Mr Mina said, we are working very closely with the Department of the Treasury and with other government agencies that will have an interest in understanding and assessing the impact of potential trade measures on different parts of the Australian economy. So that would also include the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, would include ABARES over in DAF. So we are working closely to make sure that the assessment that we are pulling together is coherent and it's consistent. And so if you look then at the advice which the testimony that Treasury offered yesterday, then that would be very similar to our own findings. That is to say, it's there are impacts there which really, a range of scenarios out there, very dynamic, very fluid. So we are just trying to keep a broad sense of what that impact would look like, recognising that the final level of the impact will reflect the size of the tariffs which have been imposed and who they've been imposed on, whether they're imposed on us directly or whether they're imposed on major trading partners.
Senator, if I may, we just wanted to correct our evidence about the attendance of Mr. Rudd, Ambassador Rudd. He was in fact in the inauguration room, as the Minister said.
Thank you very much. The relations with America, with the United States, I won't say America, it's the whole continent, with the United States of America have been historically strong. I think we're talking about the reasons they have a trade surplus with us. We're investing in AUKUS. We've done all these sorts of things. I'm concerned that the three leaders of the Quad, other than Australia, have all met person to person. Is there attempts to try and meet at the highest levels face to face in the short term around this trade area?
Senator, I would just restate that our Foreign Minister was at the inauguration, and yes, there was a meeting of Quad Foreign Ministers immediately the day after. We take this as a very encouraging sign. There has been very high-level engagement, as Dr. Sobchak has pointed out, including a visit by our Deputy Prime Minister. So we are very confident in our position, how well we are positioned at this stage.
Okay. Minister, you managed to get a Guernsey at the Democratic National Congress. Was there a choice between that and the RNC, and why was which?
Sorry, what was the question?
You went to the Democratic National Conference. Did you get an invite to the Republican National Conference? Did you have to choose? And
no, I didn't get an invite to the Republican one, and had I done so, I would have been very keen to attend. This was the first time any Australian minister had been invited to any either Republican or Democrat convention. But when I was in Chicago, I ensured that I met with Republican senators as well as the Democrats to get the best possible insight into what was going to happen at the forthcoming American election.
The travel log for the trip between 18th and 23 August 24 says ministerial meeting in Chicago. Really long meeting, 4 days. Is there more detail available on what happened in
Yes, I'd be very happy to give you a full report.
Table later?
Hey?
To table?
I'd be very happy to give you a full report on what transpired. I met a variety of... I'll get the full figure for you, but for instance, on one morning, myself and Ambassador Rudd met Catherine Tai, the United States Trade Representative. We met the Chuck Schumer, the Majority Leader in the House of Reps, and a series of very senior American political figures.
Thank you. Mr. Woods, if we're doing some work on the steel and aluminium effects, are we doing the just-in-cases on the scenarios the US has been espousing, such as 25% or matching GST or matching value-added taxes? Are we doing other scenarios on what we may be affected on if US does decide to put worldwide sanctions or tariffs on?
So, Senator, I think the challenge that we're facing is, of course, the number of announcements that are coming forward, and to be candid,
that's a challenge everyone's facing. But anyway,
the ability to model so quickly the number of scenarios that have been put forward, I think, is beyond the capability of pretty much any government department in Canberra at the moment. So the way I think across the board that we're approaching the issue would be to say that let's look at the modelling that we've been doing on the range of scenarios dating back from before Christmas. That gives us, if you like, a first order sense of what the magnitude of effects would be, even as we're waiting for some clarity about what would be the actual tariffs that the US chooses to impose. So again, if I were to come back to my previous answer, and again pointing back to what Treasury spoke to yesterday, That would be to say, looking at those scenarios from prior Christmas that as give us a baseline, that speaks to a relatively modest impact at a macro level, even as we recognise that there are going to be obviously individual industries that will be more severely affected depending on who's in the line of those tariffs. But recognising also, and this is picking up a point that the Secretary of Treasury spoke about yesterday, that the floating exchange rate, the flexible exchange rate, is quite the shock absorber for any external shocks that come to the Australian economy, such as tariffs.
Are there any works done, early or otherwise, provided government or not, on looking at retaliatory measures and potential opportunities to balance out if higher tariffs come to play between Australia and the United States?
Senator, if we can just, your question is going to the retaliation by other governments.
Pardon? No, any measures Australia is looking at or examining should tariffs be placed on Australia.
Right. Well, Senator, I think you're going now to a hypothetical, and
I'm happy to say that.
Not in a position to respond.
No. The question is not the hypothetical may happen. The question is, has work been done on those hypotheticals, which is a real question.
Senator, I think in answering that question, one would have to contemplate a hypothetical. And
Chair, I would say that if a question said was, would we look at retaliating if this happened, is a hypothetical question. The question, is work being done, should they happen, is a real question.
What I can say, Senator, is the question of the response of the Australian government in economic terms to any actions that might be taken on tariffs was traversed, as Mr Woods said earlier yesterday, by the Secretary of the Treasury, and I'd refer you to those comments.
And I accept those comments on a macro level and all those numbers. What you're not telling me is if there is any work going on by your department in real time, not hypothetically.
Not by our department.
Your department has no advice, has given no advice on exposed US things or imbalance of trade on any particular sector, which may be retaliatory, valid for retaliatory action.
Well, Senator, I think it's fair to say that we are doing everything we can to advance Australia's national interests on this issue, to advocate for Australian interests, to ensure that we have the right contacts in place, so that this is of course something which is a priority for the government, and we will continue to do everything we can to position Australia in the right way.
And I know this was asked in another meeting, but I will ask again: has there been any request for a face-to-face meeting between the Prime Minister and the President of the United States?
Senator, that's a question for the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Okay. Chair, I'm happy to rotate if...
Sure. Senator Brockman?
I'm happy to, but if there are others who've been waiting
I'm happy to
longer,
also close and we can move on to the next witness.
I'm sure I can get through this very, very quickly, Chair. Right. Thank you for your indulgence. I'll start with Mr Mina. You gave the opening statement?
Yes, that's right.
Correct. Sorry, I wasn't in the room at the time, but I did pick up a little bit of it. And I'm just reflecting on the paragraph which reads, "We need a pragmatic blend of dealing with the world as it is and hewing towards our bearings. Our commitment to openness and rules of global trade to the greatest extent possible." How does the ideological decision to ban the live export trade in sheep fit within those parameters?
Well, Senator, I think we've traversed the live sheep export issue for some time. I can take you through the situation with respect to the implementation of that policy. I could also take you through...
No, I'm just wondering how that decision, which was clearly ideological, fits within your opening statement.
Well, Senator,
and perhaps the Minister would like to answer it.
Just one at a time.
Look, I'm happy to answer it, Senator Brockman. You'll be disappointed to know the answer won't be any different from all of the other answers I've given you on every occasion that you've
given me a good one, Minister.
raised the issue. But I'm happy to go through it. Look, we took this issue to the electorate at the last election. We made it very clear that an incoming Labor government would end the shipment of live sheep and In accordance with that decision, we won the election, and I might point out one of the strongest states for us then, and I'm sure again at the next election, was Western Australia. So it was overwhelmingly endorsed, that policy, by the people of Western Australia. We did. I think we would have been criticised, Senator, if, having been elected with that policy, that suddenly we said, no, we're not going to implement the policy. We have done it in such a way to give the industry the maximum time to adapt to the change, because we understand it is a change. And of course, we've put our money where our mouth is, and provided financial assistance. You'd be aware we recently entered into a new free trade agreement with the United Arab Emirates. That's making its way through the Parliament as we speak, and I understand was endorsed by the very recently by the Treaties Committee, and therefore will be sort of quickly endorsed by the Parliament. What I'd say to those people, those farmers affected in Western Australia by this change, is that we don't want to see less sheep exports into the Middle East. We actually want to see more exports to the Middle East. One of the things, if we can achieve that, of course, is that there are more jobs in Australia, but more particularly more jobs in Western Australia. There's a link between this new free trade agreement, because the removal of those tariffs on 99.9% of all goods into the UAE gives us a special advantage over other countries without a free trade agreement. We should use that opportunity to try and export more lamb into the Middle East. The way of thinking of the UAE is that it's like the Woolies warehouse of the Middle East. If you can get your product into the UAE, you can get it to all of those countries that surround the UAE. Our ambition ought to be, and the ambition of those farmers ought to be, not to send less sheep to the Middle East, but to send more sheep to the Middle East. We can create some extra jobs in Australia, which will be good for Western Australia. There'll be a variety, because the number of flights are coming back. There's an opportunity to send high-value, either chilled or frozen meat to the Middle East, particularly that now the UAE at that lower tariff rate. I'd say to those farmers, and I have said to certainly the National Farmers Federation, we'd like to work with you to get the best result for Australia, but in particular those farmers in Western Australia. I think there's an opportunity, with a positive mindset, so put aside the opportunity to make some political points about this. There is a practical way in which we can improve both the way in which we transport our animals, but the way in which we value add our products. And that's what I'd like to do as the Trade Minister. I'm sure the Agriculture Minister thinks exactly the same way. So don't make it a political issue, make it an economic issue. And with a bit of cooperation and a bit of goodwill by everybody involved, I think we can actually get a better result for Australia by exporting chilled and frozen meat that has created jobs in Australia.
Minister, are you aware that the sheep flock in Western Australia has declined by 25% since you enacted your policy, and is predicted to decline to 50% of its size under your policy?
Well,
how is that benefiting West Australian farmers, Minister?
Well, there's a range of reasons, Senator Brockman, why the sheep flock goes up and down. What I'm saying is I think there's a good solution to this issue if there's a willingness to sit down by all of the parties and work through what is the best outcome for Australia. And I think that there's an opportunity here to export more Australian sheep and not less. And, you know, I'm...
So were you aware of the decline, Minister?
Well, as I say, the herds go up and down. We've had a terrible drought.
You're aware that 2 abattoirs have closed in Western Australia since you announced the policy?
Sure.
2 sheep meat abattoirs?
I don't think you can have it both ways, Senator Brockman. You can't say, look, there are fewer abattoirs.
And there are less sheep.
Abattoirs
you can have it both ways.
No. I don't think, with due respect, you can't have it both ways. Look, what I'm saying is...
You can't have what both ways?
What I'm saying is that there's an opportunity here to export more Australian product into the Middle East in light of that new free trade agreement with the UAE. I'd like sheep farmers to be part of that and get the financial benefit of that agreement. And this government is willing to work with the industry to get the best possible outcome. Now, it may be that, you know, you seek to exploit the situation for your political advantage. I hope that's not the case.
You sought to exploit some
No. We took a policy.
Some preferences from the Animal Justice Party.
We took a policy. We took a
You're
policy to
destroying
the
an industry.
We didn't hide our policy
yes,
under
did.
a bushel.
Oh, yes, you did.
We did not. We made it very
Last 2
clear.
elections, if I remember.
We made it very clear what we were going to do, and we did what we said we were going to do. But I think there's a way that both, you know, there's a win-win possibility here, but it does take, willingness on both parties to sit down and talk about it. We're certainly willing to do that. I'd like to see the industry do the same.
It didn't hide under a bushel. Every single Labor member in Western Australia was asked by the countrymen what the position of the Labor Party was. Not one replied. With regards to the government's ban on live sheep exports from sea, can Dfat provide details on negative feedback received from current export destination countries, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, UAE? In particular, has there been written feedback?
Has there been, sorry, Senator, the last part of the question, please?
Formal
right.
feedback. I know there's been some informal conversations. We talked about that last estimates.
Yeah, Senator, since the last estimates, there haven't been any new concerns raised. There is one additional point that Mr Mark Innes-Brown may wish to add, and I may also just add, by virtue of the statistics, that the volume and the value of live sheep exports were around about $40 million in the last financial year. That compares to approximately $4 billion in frozen and chilled sheep meat exports, just to expand on the Minister's points just now.
Senator Mark Innes-Brown, First Assistant Secretary, Middle East and Africa Division. The only, as Mr Mina said, in terms of countries, governments that have raised this, the only time this has come up, to my knowledge, and I was present, was when we had senior officials talks with Kuwait in November, and the representative of the relevant state enterprise, KLTT, Kuwait Livestock Transport and Trading, the acting CEO was present, and of course he raised his concern about the phase out of the trade. Other than that, since the last estimates, I'm not aware of any formal communication to us by any other government on the issue.
As requested at last estimates by Senator Cadell, can Dfat provide country-by-country volumes of live sheep to each Middle East destination in the past year? Is that published online by destination? I know overall volumes are published.
Look, Senator, if we have the data, we'll provide it, yes.
Okay. And could we also have chilled and frozen sheep meat exported into each Middle Eastern destination in the past year?
Beyond the totals I read out earlier, we don't have that country breakdown here, but we're certainly
Could we have both of those on notice?
You've got it here? Do you want to?
If possible, in a timely way?
I think,
Mr. Innes-Brown
I think we do have the information
I've
here,
got the values, not the volumes, if you will.
No, values fluctuate significantly. I'd prefer the volumes, to be honest.
Okay, well,
I mean, I'm happy to have both, but if you don't have both to compare, then it's probably
no, I
better.
don't.
It's probably better that you take both on notice. If you,
okay,
to be honest.
yeah, that's fine.
As I said earlier, there has been a dramatic loss in industry confidence in Western Australia. West Australian sheep farmers are getting out of sheep in droves, literally. 25% decline in 1 year in the number of sheep in Western Australia. 2 sheep meat processing facilities have closed. I believe another one is in at severe risk. I hope that's not the case, but that is what I understand. And Wool Production Forecasting Committee have reported a dramatic reduction in wool production not seen since the 1920s. Has Dfat seen or modelled the effect of the ban on valuable export commodities such as wool?
Well, Senator, these would be matters for the agriculture portfolio and their modelling capability through their institutions.
So you don't track the export volumes of commodities?
We certainly track export commodities and export volumes and values, and we'll be happy to provide those data. What we don't do is do economic modelling on future flock or export outlook for agriculture. That's properly the province of the agriculture portfolio.
All right. At last estimates, Minister Farrell, as he has just done, referred to new flight capacity. In particular, he mentioned flights out of Adelaide, improving freight capacity for cargo into the UAE. Can you quantify Emirate freight air capacity for chilled and frozen sheep meat out of Western Australia as a replacement for the WA live sheet exports by sea?
what was the question though, Senator?
Can you quantify the air freight capacity on Emirates for chilled or frozen sheep meat out of Western Australia as a replacement for live exports?
Is the question, can I identify the potential amount of,
I'm
or the actual...
I'm asking Dfat if they can quantify that.
How much sheep meat
what's the capacity?
is going, what's the capacity in
Air freight question.
air freight questions?
Yeah, it's an air freight question. Senator, look, with respect to air freight, of course, we work closely with the infrastructure and transport portfolio, and of course, in discussions with them, as the Minister's already made clear, we make very clear our interests in expansion of air freight. But as to the quantification of that air freight capacity, the modelling of it, that would be properly the transport portfolio who'd be in a position to do that.
Can Dfat provide any update on increasing the capacity flight frequency of existing carrier Qatar, who currently transport chilled and frozen sheep meat into the Middle East, particularly out of WA?
Senator, the same applies. The questions of air freight capacity are best directed to the transport portfolio.
So this was supposedly the solution, but there doesn't seem to be much of a solution. DAF recently approved protocols ahead of the commencement of the export of Australian live sheep, cattle and goats into the Kingdom of Morocco. Can you please advise why the opening of this new market was not announced either by Minister Farrell or by your department?
I'm not sure it's the province of our department, Senator.
Really? It's not a success? You've just opened up a new market, helped to open up a new market?
No, he means what?
No. Senator, when it comes to
Parliament or not?
the announcement of agricultural export protocols...
So you had nothing to do with the protocol?
They are typically matters handled, Senator, by security officials in the agriculture portfolio. As you'd know, and it is properly the province of the agriculture portfolio.
This month, the Moroccan delegation visited West Australian farms, feedlots, export facilities and toured a live sheep export vessel loading in Fremantle. What is Dfat doing to expedite the trade in up to 100,000 live sheep per annum to Morocco in order to provide food security for a nation whose flock has been decimated by years of drought?
Well, Senator, our embassy in Rabat has played a role in terms of furnishing, facilitating the flow of documentation during the development of this arrangement. So that has been our particular role.
That's it?
Well, as we explained earlier, Senator, the questions relating to the actual negotiation of the substance of the export protocols are probably for DAF and supported absolutely by our embassy in Rabat in the way that Mr Ennis Brown has mentioned.
Thought you'd be happy about it. The visiting Moroccan delegation outlined plans to secure their first sheep shipment before the commencement of the Northern Summer Moratorium. What opportunity does this new trade provide with respect to growing Australia's trade relationship with Morocco?
Well, I think, Senator, it is self-evident that there are now export protocols in place, and that does provide an outlet for Australian trade into that market. Of course, we've got strong interests in expansion and diversification of our trade into North Africa, and that's absolutely, this is a part of that.
Bit hard to expand and diversify when you're closing down and banning. In May 2023, Rick Wilson MP, in his capacity as Shadow Assistant Minister for Trade, visited Morocco at the invitation of then Agriculture Minister Professor Mohamed Siddiqui, where he attended the Agricultural and Trade Exposition SIAM. This is French by the look of it, and I shouldn't even try and pronounce it. Salon International de l'Agriculture Maroc. Did I get anywhere near close? Probably not. Along with European Union, Middle Eastern and African ag ministers and delegates. On his return, Minister Wilson penned a letter to Minister Farrell recommending Australia be represented at future SIAMs. Has Dfat or Austrade received any instructions to have Australian agriculture, technology and trade represented at this event?
Received instructions, Senator, from
the Minister.
Senator, as I've been trying to explain, there is absolutely an interest in expansion of trade with North Africa. We, as a matter of course, will be looking for opportunities to do so in the sector of agribusiness, and this agricultural exposition in Morocco is no doubt one of the many opportunities available to plug into our expanding export trade into North Africa. Now, of course, meat is part of that. You set out earlier the $4 billion in frozen and chilled sheep meat, but so too a range of other Australian exports, whether they be in dairy or other agricultural sectoral areas. So we'll look for those opportunities and use them to the full.
Just this week, Senator, I met the Moroccan ambassador, and the desire to facilitate greater trade and investment, of course, was one of the subjects we traversed. So we are looking, and she's very active, talking to Australian business, as is our ambassador, new ambassador in Rabat. So it's sort of not just about, it's across the board. There's a range of areas we're looking at. So it is one of the features of our relationship with Morocco. It's actually quite a dynamic relationship. There's been, as you mentioned, there's been Mr Wilson has visited, but also there was a private parliamentary group went in recent months. We're coming up to a significant anniversary of diplomatic relations next year with Morocco, and it's also one of the subjects I discussed with the ambassador about finding appropriate ways to mark that anniversary. So it's been a relationship that's grown since we opened in Morocco, which wasn't all that long ago.
Well, what do you think, Minister Farrell? I mean, brand new market just opened up, 100,000 sheep exported before the moratorium hits in the middle of the year.
We should.
It's a great opportunity for Australia. We should be in there, shouldn't we?
We should be taking every opportunity.
That's a great opportunity for West Australian farmers, isn't it?
We should be taking every opportunity to increase our export opportunities, particularly to Morocco. I myself have had some discussions with Moroccan officials about that very topic. The whole focus, if you like, of the federal government since we came to office almost 3 years ago has been to increase trade diversification. And that's what we've done, Senator. And of course, the great beneficiary of a lot of that has been the West Australian economy. We continue to constantly look for new opportunities. Since we've come to government, of course, we've implemented the UK Free Trade Agreement. That has resulted in a doubling of our trade with the United Kingdom, but a 500% increase in beef and sheep meat exports into the United Kingdom. In fact, one of the reasons that the Europeans gave me for not agreeing to a higher volume of sheep meat and beef into the EU under the proposed EU Free Trade Agreement was that we had taken their market in the United Kingdom. Last night I was with the Prime Minister at Deakin University in Melbourne, where we launched our roadmap to India. We want to dramatically expand our opportunities in India. The Prime Minister referred to a 168% increase in agricultural exports to India. There's opportunities there. I've talked about the UAE Free Trade Agreement. That gives us great opportunities in the Middle East, and we are looking for those opportunities everywhere, Senator. Wherever we can expand our trade, we are doing that. Why? Because what we saw is if you put all of your eggs in the one basket, you're sure to come a cropper. So it's our view that we take every opportunity that we can to expand our export opportunities, and we'll continue to do that. I mean, it's a tough world out there, Senator Brockman. There are plenty of people that would like to take our markets. We have to be an activist government. We can't sit on our hands. We have to be out there selling our product, and that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 3 years. And that's what we'll continue to do when we're re-elected for the next 3 years.
Okay.
I'm asking you not to be an activist. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. Thank you,
Minister.
Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brockman.
I'm also very pragmatic, Senator Brockman.
All right.
The ultimate pragmatist.
You are, Minister. That's why everyone loves you.
Didn't like my answer.
Senator Cadell.
Thank you. Has the department been consulted at all on the government's carbon leakage review?
Senator, I think you might be referring to the Yotso review led by the eminent economist Frank Yotso, and yes, we have been engaged in that process.
When did you first get involved in that process?
Quite early on, Senator, in the early stages of the process. I certainly spoke to Professor Yotso myself, at an early stage in his work. It may have been around middle of last year, but we've been fully engaged.
Okay. Has your department provided any written submissions or policy advice to that review?
As to written submissions, I will have to check. We have. So, Senator David Woods, Chief Economist, we've engaged with the review through a number of ways. As Mr Meany said, right from the very beginning of the review, I think at the start of last year, we've had staff seconded to the review. We've commented not so much through written submissions as
in the normal business of government, where papers have been circulated for comment, we have offered a comment, and our colleagues in the trade law team have also offered legal advice.
Could they be tabled?
Senator, it's not in line with long-standing practice. We won't be able to table the legal advice.
I understand. The other policy comments or any written submission?
So those go, I mean, these are the sort of normal thing that you would have in a bureaucracy, so they would be emails bouncing around over a sustained period
If I narrow
of time.
my scope, have there been any formal policy submissions at all?
No,
Okay,
no,
that's
Senator,
fine.
there haven't.
Now, the slide deck for the November second consultation paper was put out in DQ.
Yeah.
Now, Professor Yotso, in that, is saying steel exports are set to decrease by circa 10% by 2030, and cement clinker imports are set to increase by more than 25%. Is that the understanding of the department?
Senator, look, I'm going to. I know that this was traversed at some length with DQ the other day. I'm not in a position really to offer any more comment than what has already been covered. It was that modelling and those results were done through the review, not through my team. So I can't really offer any more comment.
So, your team specifically, what sort of jurisdiction do you have over the people that are seconded? Are they no longer reporting through? That's what I want to get to your department's input into that, yeah.
So we had one team member, to be precise. He was working directly into that team in DQ, but in doing so, he obviously brought expertise from Dfat in terms of trade and trade policy, and he was then the ability to help us to understand at what point the process was at, the better to help engage, for us to then engage with the review process being led out of DQ.
Has the department...
Let me. Been supported out of DQ, still
Right,
been,
okay.
I should say, chose my words badly, being supported out of DQ, but obviously still being led by Professor Yotso.
Yep. What advice or notes has the department specifically given regarding the projected 25% increase in cement clinker being imported into Australia?
Senator, I'm stretching my memory there. I don't recall that to have been a specific feature. We were looking more at the framework of the review, its broader findings in terms of carbon leakage, which yes would include what you're describing, but how that would then translate through into the policy options that were described in the consultation papers that were released.
So I think you said earlier, but I don't want to verbal you, I just want clarification. No economic modelling on the decrease of the steel?
Not through my team, not through Dfat.
Right, understood. So the next step then is the potential, and it's discussion paper, the potential creation of CBAM?
So Senator, I mean, as again, I think you may have covered this with DQ the other day. The report, as I understand, is still with Professor Yotso.
Yep.
As I understand, is yet to be completed and considered. Certainly yet to be considered by the government. So at this point, it remains as on the label of being an independent report.
Yep.
And there's been no decision, no consideration taken by government onto his recommendations.
Is it the policy position of the department, Mr. Mena, that a CBAM is a trade barrier?
Senator, these are matters for government. What we do advise on are the economic costs associated with certain measures, also the economic costs of absence of coordination of measures. And we also, in addition, provide advice on the legal consistency of measures with the World Trade regime. We don't take a departmental policy position. These are matters for government.
What is the legal position in the world trade regime of CBAMs?
Well, Senator, as with most things relating to public international law, these are complex questions, and they depend entirely on the consequences and the design of certain measures. So it's difficult to make broad generalisations.
I understand that. It's not that difficult. If I accept that a choice whether we implement a CBAM is a choice of government, how you would view another country's CBAM is not a choice of government. That would be advice. How do you see CBAMs by other countries?
Well, there it's easier to speak with respect to past practice. So, with respect, for instance, to the European Union, we have made the case to the European Union that design of a border adjustment mechanism needs to meet certain provisions of the World Trade Organisation agreements, and we've been urging consistency on a variety of points, including non-discrimination, the method of the levying of measures and the like, to ensure consistency, and urging that of the European Union designers of their particular scheme.
Right. Next question I have is written. I'm taking your thing. It's a hypothetical, so I'll skip that one. No. Have you provided advice on potential risk to exporters if to the government or to the consultation, let's say to the consultation, on the potential risks of a CBAM being implemented by Australia?
We have provided, as Mr Woods has already made clear, advice to the process, including on how the process might deal with carbon leakage in a manner that is most consistent with both our trade interests, that does go to your point on exporters, but also with respect to our trade law interests.
So both aspects. So,
both aspects.
But you've done the it could in relation to CBAM on exporters. Is your evidence there? Is that able to be tabled? Your advice there?
Well, as Mr Woods has explained, in the normal deliberations of government, we're not able to share that advice. But and it has been a very dynamic process also, as Mr Woods has explained. We can talk to the fact of the legal advice, but long-standing practice dictates that we can't share that advice.
I understand. Has the department received any feedback from trading partners of concerns about a border mechanism?
Well, we can talk in the broad, Senator, about that question in respect of the policy debates that are underway.
Correct.
In capitals such as Geneva, and there have been a number of countries active in the discussions in capitals such as Geneva, seeking that CBAMs in their entirety, in the general, carbon border adjustment mechanisms be designed in a manner that is trade consistent and trade law consistent. And that's been a comment directed to all those who might be contemplating them, including other jurisdictions such as Canada, the UK, etc. There's also been an effort underway in Paris under the auspices of the OECD to find methods by which countries might coordinate on the design of CBAM such that they might be made more interoperable, again, in order to reduce the trade costs of different systems, making the costs of trade higher at the border between different regimes. So that effort is an effort sponsored by the OECD, in which a number of countries engaged, and Australia is engaged in that process too.
I accept those broader. Oh, sorry.
So, sorry, I might also add, Senator, that one of the features of the review process that Frank Yotso, Professor Yotso, has been running has been quite extensive international engagement.
Right.
So Professor Yotso has travelled to quite a range of our major trading partners. And I'll name a few off the top of my head. It might not be comprehensive, but certainly he's been through Europe, North Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, at various points through the review process to outline what the review is about and the range of issues that he is considering as part of the review process. And the general sense from that has been a very welcoming sense of the engagement of the process itself being important. That trading partners have welcomed that outreach and the opportunity to provide their views. If I was to try and sum up the feedback that, as I understand it, has been relatively relaxed about the work that Frank Iozzo has been leading and that prospect of Australia taking action against carbon leakage. Again, reinforcing the point, though, that there has been no government view taken on this. It's purely an independent review.
I accept the independent review. I accept it going forward. I'm looking for the communication between trading partners on this. So, accepting all of that, has there been any government come direct to Dfat and express a view that any CBAM would be protectionist or seen as a tariff?
Any CBAM
Australia
or any CBAM introduced by Australia?
Any CBAM introduced
well,
by
there is no proposal.
I understand that.
And I think as it goes to the nature of the feedback that the Iozzo review has been encountering, Senator, I'd recommend that those questions be directed to Professor Iozzo in his review.
I was asking if your department, given the fact, let's go, it's not hypothetical.
Just to be clear, it's an independent review process. We haven't been managing that or seeking to insert ourselves into it in a direct way.
But if I put the other way around, a president of a country in the United States is talking about putting potential trade tariffs on other countries, and we are over there lobbying and saying we are concerned by this and this is what we want to do, and that is a hypothetical at the moment. Has any country come to your department and said they have concerns about Australia even considering or looking at this option?
Not to our knowledge, Senator. We can take that on notice if you wish. But
I'd like you to take that on notice.
And I'd sort of confirm that. I mean, I've been closely involved with the review from the start, and certainly not to my knowledge has any trading partner come and expressed concern along those lines.
Okay, that's good to know. I have a change if you want to change. Anyone up there? Or?
We don't need to change.
Okay. EU deforestation rules, if I may.
Go on, Ross, for now. So, wind out the clock.
Given getting a little bit political, there was a co-signing of a matter of urgency in the Senate this year, I think by you, Senator, by Chair, about deforestation, about calling...
I did. I had a motion with...
Senator Canavan, I believe.
That's right. That's right.
For a delay in the implementation of the EU deforest regulation and the EU decision to postpone for 12 months. Has the government now been able to secure formal recognition of Australian land use and forest definitions within the UEDR?
Well, Senator, the first point to make here is that DAF is the lead on this issue in respect of the technical specifics. We have been working very closely with DAF. I will say that we have been working on two fronts. One is to advocate generally our views about the construction of the regulation. We think it could be much better constructed, better framed around risk and less unduly administratively burdensome. We also have been making some points about the specific situation in which Australia finds itself in the context of the regulation, the proposed regulation, as you say, Senator, and that includes to continue to advocate for a low-risk rating to reflect our status and to reduce the compliance burden on our industries.
Okay. Minister, have you had any discussions regarding this specific matter with the EU Commissioner for Trade?
I haven't spoken about any issue with the new EU Trade Minister since his appointment a few weeks ago.
We can confirm, Senator, that Minister Collins was able to raise with her counterpart.
Right.
Minister Collins raised it with EU Commissioner for Agriculture, Christoph Hansen.
Yep.
Our concerns along the lines that I just set out.
Right. Is action taken by the EU to update their global forest map, which incorrectly classifies parts of Australia? Do you know if steps are being taken there? There was some concern that green shade cloth was actually being picked up as forest in Australia.
Senator, I think the thrust of your question is exactly the direction in which our advocacy has been focused, but I'm not in a position, I'm sorry, to confirm whether the EU has actually responded in the way that you have just described. I think, again, given DAF's leading status on this issue, is best directed to them.
From your department, have you done an analysis, and I understand you go through, or done an assessment, let's not say an analysis, of how the EUDR will affect Australian exporters?
Again, Senator, the DAF portfolio is leading on analysis, and the Australian Bureau of Agriculture and Resource Economics has been working on this issue, and we know that they've been working on inconsistencies between the EU's data sets and our own, along the lines that you've just set out. So I think, again, best directing these questions to the DAF portfolio and ABS.
Fair enough. Are industry representatives talking to you as well as DAF, or they're only talking to DAF directly? Have you had direct concerns from industry representatives about this issue?
We can take that on notice, Senator. We would be surprised if they were not talking to us about this, but I'll have to take that on notice.
If I'm happy to take it on notice, if you take it on notice, can you say who and when, if that's possible? Thank you very much. Minister, do you intend to prevent the UDR from becoming a technical barrier to trade for Australia if it's implemented?
Yes.
Has the department, I don't want to know what the opinion is, but has the department formed a legal opinion or an opinion assessed whether the EUDR's treatment of Australian goods is consistent with WTA rules, given we want to go to a rules-based trade system?
Well, we hopefully are well and truly within a rules-based trading system, Senator. And
we're leaving it quickly, but
one of the elements of your last question in relation to technical barriers to trade goes precisely to the kind of advocacy and representations that we've been making in Geneva on this issue. The WTO agreement on the technical barriers to trade is the framework through which we've been examining this regulation along with other elements of WTO law. And Ms Holmes, our Chief Trade Law Officer, is here. Should you wish to talk in the general, we can't, as I said, talk more specifics, but in the WTO Technical Barriers to Trade Committee, we have also been emphasising very much the need for consistency with that body of law and this new proposed regulation.
And can I say, I appreciate it very much. This is a big thing for people. Even the green shade coming up as forest, feedlots are coming up as woody feedlot on their EU mapping systems. It is very concerning to our people what they are doing. But thank you very much, and I think that's all I have in this section. But I think Senator Sharma has something.
Sorry,
Senator Sharma has something in this section, but I think I'm done.
Does he? He looks a bit surprised.
No, I'm ready to go. Could I just pick up on something though? You said. Minister, did you say you haven't spoken to the new EU Trade Commissioner yet, or encountered him?
I have not spoken to him.
You've written a letter or something?
I've congratulated him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you planning on, have you got a planned encounter, or is there a ministerial level meeting coming up, or?
No, don't have any plans.
Okay. I just was wondering, I mean, do we touch on
the ball's in their court, right? So
in terms of
we made
the FTA.
We've made it very clear that we're happy to sit down at any time, at any place, and continue the negotiations for a free trade agreement. But it takes two to tango, and they have not come back to us since my last meeting with Trade Minister Dombrovskis, they have to demonstrate to Australia that they are serious about negotiating a free trade agreement because based on everything that they've offered us so far, I don't see any evidence yet that even with the change of Trade Commissioner, that the Europeans are seriously interested in a free trade agreement with Australia. I hope I'm wrong, Senator Sharma, but they have to demonstrate, you know, we said to them, you have to have a better offer for Australian farmers if you want a free trade agreement. They did not come back with a better offer. They have not come back with a better offer. And I'm not going to waste my time sitting down with people who are not serious about a free trade agreement.
Did you reiterate that expectation in your communication to the new Commissioner?
I would have been more polite, I'm afraid.
But you did express an interest.
I've explained to the EU ambassador on countless occasions in the last 18 months since negotiations broke down that we are willing to have further discussions, but there's got to be an acceptance. I mean, you look at how the world is going in terms of trade right now. I would have thought it was self-evidently in the interests of the Europeans to say to Australia, we want to sit down and keep these negotiations going and work out a deal. But I have not had an indication from them that that's what they want to do. The moment I do, I'll sit down and we'll resume negotiations. But there's no point doing what we've done on the two previous occasions, which is simply, you know, come to a stalemate. That's not in our interests, it's not in their interests. They have to make a decision that, given what's going on in the rest of the world, that they're serious about free trade. And if they are, we'll sit down and negotiate with them.
Thank you, Minister. And I just had a couple of questions about the market access provisions under a FTA with China, horticultural market access.
We'll do our best, Senator. As you know, these are also matters by security matters that are most likely the province of Dfat, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, look, I'm probably not seeking a specific update, but an understanding of the process. So I understand, and forgive my layperson language here because I won't have the terminology correct, but we have a sort of rolling 2x2 market access process for horticultural goods with China.
Perhaps, again, Senator, we need to be pretty clear about our limitations of our competence here on biosecurity matters. But as you know, these free trade agreements are large umbrellas for economic cooperation across agencies, and they also entail an ongoing process of cooperation under committee structures. Now, Mr Kevaram and I have met our Chinese counterparts recently, and as recently as last year, to talk about a range of issues, but we did that with our Dfat colleagues. Mm-hmm. So we're neither of us are really in a position tonight to talk about a two by two on horticulture, if that's what you want to delve into, unfortunately, Senator. But we can take some of this on notice if you
wish. Look, I guess I wanted to understand how the process works. Maybe I can articulate what I understand to be the process, and then you can correct me. So, from what I understand, each country nominates 2 horticultural products for negotiation about market access, and I believe that Australia's 2 products in there are apples and blueberries, and China has, I'm not going to get this right, I'm afraid, juju berries or something, or...
Right.
Can anyone help me here on this one, Mr.
Well, I doubt. I'm sorry, Senator, we're really out of our technical depth here. There may be questions relating to the resources applied to biosecurity market access request processes that are dictating this need for tight sort of 2x2, but Dfat biosecurity experts will be there.
Okay, but look, my concern at heart is that there seems to have been, I don't know if this is the result of a a conscious decision by government or something else. The process had been that each country has nominated 2 goods. When one comes off, you can put another one on. So if apples are concluded for Australia, for instance, we can nominate another product, and that process can then begin with DAF's Chinese counterparts. It now seems to be, if I understand it correctly, that you now need to clear. It's no longer a rolling 2-by-2 process. You need to clear and conclude negotiations, market access negotiations, for both. So apples and blueberries would both need to be concluded before Australia could nominate.
Yeah, I really ought not speak on behalf of DAF here. This sounds like a resource management issue in the biosecurity.
Okay, and Dfat
coordinated
officials
approaches
would not be involved in those.
We're engaged to convene. We're engaged to ensure that we do drive trade openness in the broad. We convene the committees, and Mr Kevaram's division plays a whole of government coordinating role for a range of FTAs. But when it comes to individual access requests, or even the resourcing of those access request management processes, exactly, it's a DAF call.
Okay. Well, look, I'll leave it there. But could I ask if you could take on notice whether this 2-by-2 market access process
Very happy to.
has changed from, I think, what it's described as a rolling 2-by-2.
Right. No, we'll
process.
consult with DAF and we'll come back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mann.
Just on the EU CEPA, can Dfat please list a provider of Australian agricultural industry stakeholders that was consulted with on that matter?
Just, if I may, Senator...
UAE.
UAE,
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry. EU, sorry, my bad.
But I didn't know we had a CEPA.
So many bloody letters in this.
Just say
And the
UAE,
question-
free trade agreement. That's,
The question
everyone
again...
knows what you're talking about.
Question again, please, Senator.
Any agricultural industry stakeholders you consulted with?
How many?
Yep.
across the negotiation of the
Yes,
of
please.
the entire agreement?
Yes.
Okay. Well, look.
Take it on notice.
Thank you, Senator Ravi Kevaram, First Assistant Secretary, Free Trade Agreement and Stakeholder Engagement Division, and I also headed the UAE FTA negotiations. Senator, yes, we did engage with a wide range of agricultural bodies throughout the course of the negotiations. The complete list is attached to our the national interest analysis that was part of the J. Scott consideration.
Okay. We've had some feedback directly to us that industry felt the feedback wasn't strong enough or consistent enough. Did ALEC express a concern that they weren't consulted enough and that animal welfare people were consulted more than the industry?
Thank you, Senator. This was indeed a subject of ALEC's submissions / comments into the Joint Standing Committee hearing process with respect to animal welfare. And just to make clear that, well, three things. First of all, we consulted very, very broadly. So we start the consultations by calling for anyone who has an interest to come in and either put in a submission, which can be commercial in confidence, or to have individual chats and so on. So we did that in the UAE context, and there were a range of organizations that we spoke to very closely. Once the negotiations are underway, particularly with respect to things that are of direct interest to that industry. So, for example, wine industry, what are the things that you would see as a minimum? Same with the meat industry, same with agriculture more broadly. So the consultation process was very wide and broad, and as part of the consultation process and building on the outcome that had happened in the UK FTA process, where there had been a chapter on animal welfare, there were very clear submissions that had been put into that process that had indicated the expectation of segments of the community that wanted strong animal welfare provisions. Okay. Through the consultation process, we did discuss this, and views were put to us about making sure that it didn't go beyond what was in the UK context, but also views put to us that obviously we should seek to be as ambitious as possible. With respect to animal welfare specifically, and we have put this into the JSCOT process, we had a number of very broad stakeholder engagement processes as the negotiations were afoot, and we specifically mentioned at one of our meetings on the 14th of June 2024, where we talked about the fact that we were looking to have animal welfare provisions in the FTA, in the UAE FTA, and indicated that it was very likely that they would not go beyond what was in the UK FTA, but indicated that this was still subject of negotiation and discussion. ALEC was not at that meeting, and in our submission to JSCOT, we've made very clear that they were invited, but they were not at that meeting. But there was, as I say, throughout this process, a very clear expectation / anticipation / pressure that we would have animal welfare provisions.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
While Ravi's here, I think we should note the effort that
Yes.
Ravi went to get a free trade agreement in record time. In record time, no Australian agreement has ever been negotiated in the time frame that Ravi managed to negotiate the UAE trade agreement, and I think we should recognise that. And no sooner had he finished that agreement than he was on to a second agreement with India, and is making great progress in that regard.
It won't be as easy because I didn't spend 6 months in India like I did in the UAE, making it easy for him.
But can I say this? If
Probably made it harder for him.
people come to you and say, look, we haven't, had an opportunity to put our message across to government, my door is always open, and any time you want me to see any of your constituents about any of these issues, I'm always only too happy, especially for you, Senator Cadell, but also for you, Senator Sharma, if you've got some. If you've got some Europeans out there who reckon they want to do a free trade agreement, send them my way. But my door is always open. This government's door is always open. And if they've got complaints, well, come and tell me about them and I'll see if I can fix them. But let me say, this is one of the best free trade agreements, this UAE agreement, one of the best free trade agreements that Australia's ever negotiated. And we should be very proud as a country of what we've done. But if anybody's unhappy, get them to come and see me, because I haven't heard a single complaint either from the UAE or from any industry. I mean, don't forget, with wine, we've got the best deal.
Sounds a bit like Trumpish now.
I'm learning. I'm picking it up. It was after that convention. Oh no, wait a sec. That was the Democrats.
You should go over and see the president, right?
No, this is the best deal we've got. We should be very proud of it. In a time of really difficult trade issues around the world, we're kicking goals, Senator Cadell, and we will continue to do so.
Indeed. Senator Sharma?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick updates, if I could, on various free trade negotiation matters. Where are we up to with the GCC FTA? What's that status?
The GCC.
It's been going a while, I think.
Was that the only...
Oh, and I've got one more as well, on the CPTPP.
CPTPP?
GCC and CPTPP, if you want to.
Stay here,
CPTPP.
Don't go anywhere.
Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
Comprehensive.
CPTPP.
used to be the
All right.
TPP.
Or TCP, right? It used to be just the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Trans-Pacific Partnership under Obama. Now it's the CPTPP.
Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement.
All right. We'll go back to your
So
original question.
GCC, FTA, Mr. Innisbrown, good to see you again.
We obviously recently we've been, Rav and his team have been heavily preoccupied with the UAE negotiations. We've obviously looked at this with the GCC over quite a few years. There was a little flurry about 4 years ago when they expressed an interest again in doing an FTA with us. With 6 countries with varying degrees of ambition, it's obviously always been a challenging proposition, but we haven't never ruled it out. We're still accepting submissions on our website. Now that we've got the UAE negotiation done, we're starting to have another look at it. New Zealand obviously did an agreement. I mean, one of the issues we've always been aiming for an ambitious and high quality agreement, not just, getting an agreement done. So that's been a consideration. So we're now in the process of looking at it again, whether it is possible to take forward a high quality, ambitious agreement.
Is the New Zealand GCC agreement what we would consider to be?
I think we're still
quality?
looking at it. It's quite I might defer to Mr. Quelron, but it's quite long term in terms of some of the tariff
the schedules
and reductions. So I think we're still having a close look at it.
Mr. Cavalaran, did you want to?
Just on that. From time to time, the issue gets raised. I think we are more likely to get individual countries in that group come to us and say the others aren't sufficiently ambitious. What about negotiating with us? And I think, to be honest with you, Senator Sharma, we're more likely to do agreements with individual countries than we are to get them all together. And I think some of them now, given what we've done with the UAE, regret not coming to talk to us a bit earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
The CPTPP, if I could.
Sure. Quick.
So we're taking over the chairing of that from next year, is that right?
This year.
This year, we're
I'm
currently the chair.
When? Now?
Already, yes.
And what's the program for our year of chairpersonship?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have the Canadian Trade Minister come and visit me the week before last, and we talked about this very topic. Canada had been the chair last year, and we wanted to talk about handover and all of those things, which we've now done. We'll have a couple of meetings, most likely in Australia, in the course of the year of the group. The big challenge is how we approach the issue of additional entrants into the scheme. I think we put Costa Rica through just before Christmas. So the sequence since I've been in this job, we've added the United Kingdom. That was mildly tortuous process, but we got there in the end. Costa Rica, it was a bit more of a smooth process. There's 6 or 7 countries out there who have indicated that they'd like to join. We need to work out a process of how we deal with those countries which would like to join us. Obviously, this is an agreement of very high standards that have to be met before you can come in, and it also requires consensus. Every country has to agree for a new country to come in. So, in those circumstances, during the course of the year, we'll make progress on how we deal with those new countries coming in.
Okay. And With Costa Rica, just to clarify, have they actually been invited to join, or a working group has been set up to?
They applied.
Okay, yeah.
They applied in the usual. They were one of the early applicants. I'm not sure that they were the first applicant. They had the very strong support of former Senator Matthias Cormann. He was a very strong advocate on their behalf, and we were very happy to support their admission. They are, a very progressive country interested in free trade, and we were very happy to welcome them as part of the members.
But you're right, Senator. There is a process, an established process. There's an establishment of an accessions working group, and that both looks at the compliance of the applicant with rules in the agreement and also with market access separately.
So an accessions working group has been set up for Costa Rica?
Correct.
And what are the other countries that have expressed an interest in joining formally, or economies for that matter?
Thank you, Senator. So the list of applicants in alphabetical order: China, Ecuador, Indonesia, Taiwan, Ukraine, and Uruguay are the ones that have applied in addition to Costa Rica.
Okay. And do we expect, I'm particularly interested in Taiwan's application, flag here, do we expect that the CPTPP will consider that this year and Australia's chairing? I mean, obviously it depends on being able to reach a decision, but or consensus rather amongst the members, but is it expected that will be dealt with this year?
Well, as I said before, there's a process. Those countries, we're very pleased that Indonesia, for instance, recently took the step to indicate it would like to join. And we will go through the process that we've done with the United Kingdom, with Costa Rica, and appropriately consider all of the applications as as has been established.
Is there any agreed hierarchy amongst those applications within the membership at the moment?
No, there's no.
There's not an agreement that next cab off the
No agreement, no.
And if I can add to what the Minister has said, as he said, there's an ongoing process that is continuing to consider all of the applicants. But this year, in 2025, there is a real focus on trying to make sure we deal with the Costa Rican process expeditiously, and there are also, in fact, out of the Vancouver meeting that Canada hosted in November, there was a very busy agenda that was put forward for what we have to try and get done this year, considering future accession applicants, and moving that process along is part of that work as well, as is concluding the general review, considering other areas for CPTPP negotiation, etc.
Okay. Thank you. That was all the questions I had on.
Thank you very much.
I think that's it for.
That's it for the opposition. Okay, excellent. Now, I just had a couple of questions, if I can, on India. I know last night you mentioned earlier, Minister Farrell, that you, the Prime Minister, I think the Foreign Affairs Minister, attended or launched the new roadmap.
Yes, correct.
For Australia's economic engagement with India.
Yep.
And being from the good state of Victoria, a very large community from India, why is it so important for Australia to engage with India?
Well, we've got some officials who can give you that answer, and then I'll give my answer.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks, Senator. Sarah Story, First Assistant Secretary, South and Central Asia Division. Thank you for the question. Why did we do this roadmap? Because closer economic ties with India are very much in Australia's national interests. India is an essential partner, as the Prime Minister said last night at the launch, as we diversify our economic and trade links. India's economy is projected to be the third largest by 2030. It's already the world's most populous country, and it's growing in ways that is complementary to our economy. So thanks to our first FTA with India, the Economic and Cooperation and Trade Agreement, India is already our 5th largest export market. And the new roadmap for Australia's economic engagement with India takes stock and aims to focus and accelerate our efforts based on over 400 consultations in every state and territory and in India, and receiving over 70 submissions. Many of them were from the Indian-Australian diaspora, who, numbering nearly 1 million, are certainly the engine as the living bridge between our nations with their unique connections. As the Prime Minister also said, the roadmap is critical to helping us fully realise our potential in India, which will be a boon to our economy, to our business, and for our jobs and prosperity. The Trade Minister said it's a blueprint for Australian business, focusing on 4 superhighways of growth. They are clean energy, education and skills, agribusiness and tourism. There are 47 action points in the roadmap, and there are cross-cutting sub-sectors as well, namely including investment, technology and IT, space, sports, arts and culture, defence and health. The roadmap also came with the announcement of a $16 million India Trade Investment Accelerator Fund and $4 million extending the Centre for Australia-India Relations Matri Grants program.
That's great news, Minister.
It was a very well attended function last night. At the,
Shame I couldn't be there. I was stuck here in estimates.
Well, our
I was invited,
member
actually.
for Chisholm was there, Karina, and she was very well received.
A very fine local member.
By the local Indian community. But, I mean, I'm starting to repeat myself here a little bit, but given the uncertainties in world trade right now, India represents a wonderful opportunity for us. But it's one thing to have, words on a piece of paper. It's another to convert those words into practical results for Australian businesses. There's a huge opportunity there in India. Australian business has to grab it. We'll help them, but they've actually got to do the effort. They've got to go over there, start the discussions. People say, oh, well, it's hard to do business in India, but, people used to say that 30 years ago about China. The opportunities are there. We simply have to take them, and we have to... In some way, I see my job as pushing businesses out the door and into India. We've got a fantastic Indian diaspora here, very hard-working people, young people, enthusiastic people, very switched on in terms of space and new technology and all of those things. We have a wonderful opportunity, and we need to grab it with both hands.
And what are the sort of Australian businesses that you and your department expect that will benefit from the greater economic engagement with India?
Yeah, well, obviously, if we get a new free trade agreement, then that opens up a whole lot of other opportunities, particularly in agriculture. But I think it doesn't matter where you look. The Trade Minister came to the Clare Valley, and I'm told he hasn't stopped talking about Australian wine since he got back into India. Obviously, that's an opportunity for us. While he was in Adelaide, we took him to Lot 14 to see some of the work we're doing on space. They're very interested in space, and of course, there's a company called Fleet. I don't know if you know about Fleet, but they make little products, spacecraft that are full of antennae. They send them up into space on a Elon Musk rocket. Somebody goes out from Adelaide in a Hilux. They put down 4 pegs in an area which they think is prospective for lithium. And as that satellite goes over, it sends down all these waves and tells you whether there's any lithium and how much lithium is under the ground.
Oh, wow.
And he was very interested in that technology. South Australia, as you know, is the space state, and doing great jobs in space. And of course, that's one particular area, Senator, where I think we can do a lot more with India.
Well, I wouldn't want to speak ill of the great state of South Australia, given where you're from, and a very fine Premier indeed there. Could I just ask one other thing? Has the government committed any additional resources to help deliver on this initiative?
Yes, Senator.
Story?
Yes, Senator. As mentioned earlier, there's been an announcement of $16 million over 4 years, commencing in 25-26, for the Australia-India Business Accelerator, the Accelerator Fund, in fact, and $4 million extending over the same period around extending the Maitri grants, which will enable that connectivity and the collaboration pieces.
Excellent. Well, that's a good news story. And on behalf of the committee, also want to say thanks to Ravi. I know you, all your work as well, being the co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of the United Arab Emirates. I know what you and your team, Story and others, do a fine job at making sure that we can continue to export the finest things that come out of this great country. And on behalf of the committee, I want to say thank you, Mr. Mena, to you, to Mr. Ravi, your team, Sarah as well, and everyone else that's watching tonight. So well done. Now, on that note, Minister, happy to release the department. There are no other questions.
I endorse your
10 seconds early.
thanks.
Well, I take that. That's a win. So good night, everyone.